When his daughter disappears, a desperate father turns to a psychic for answers.
She's passed.
The psychic tells him she's already dead.
My mind just didn't want to accept it.
But detectives are skeptical.
As a detective, I have to look at hard, plain facts.
But as her visions begin to ring true, they bring a warning.
I really feel panic.
Same guy that killed Stacy is going to kill again.
Can the psychic lead police to a killer before it's too late? July 22nd, 1992. In Tempe, Arizona, a suburb of Phoenix. College student Stacy Hendrickson disappears from her apartment without a trace. She was just 21. For her father back home in Ohio, it's the worst thing he can imagine.
I never ever thought I'd have to face this kind of thing in my life. My mind just didn't want to accept it. And then finally when it hit me, I just, like I say, my knees buckled and I just fell in the chair.
In Arizona, Stacy was going to college, away from home for the first time. A compassionate, caring young woman, Stacy was training to help children with diabetes, a condition she herself suffered from. If she's still alive, her disease may be her worst enemy.
There's a time element involved, and it's very serious. She's probably got approximately 48 hours before she'd go into insulin coma.
Tempe, Arizona detective Alan Reed is placed in charge of the investigation. He begins at her apartment, where she was last seen.
We knew that Stacy was missing and that she was diabetic, and I found inside the refrigerator her insulin, which she needed to take. And we thought that she would have taken that with her if she had gone voluntarily with someone. But it was obvious that there had been some type of force used, as we had two forced open doors.
Stacy's roommate Virginia was at her mother's the night Stacy disappeared. She provides a list of friends for police to talk to. Reed hopes one of them will know where Stacy is. But back in Ohio, 2,000 miles from the investigation, Stacy's father can't just sit back and wait. A neighbor convinces him to talk to a psychic.
Hi, I'm Raleigh.
Hi, Neil. I felt some desperation in his voice that kind of made me realize that whether he was skeptical or not, he was at wit's end.
Gail St. John claims she can see and feel things that most of us cannot. Her gift has helped to find other missing children. Maybe she could find Stacy.
When I started looking at Stacy's picture, and I was just kind of, just picking up vibrations between looking at the picture and feeling Raleigh, and just kind of, and all of a sudden, just, it was so fast, Stacy was next to me, and I kind of took Raleigh's hand and said to him, I have to tell you something. Stacy's gone.
And I just kind of a lump in my throat. And she starts describing an area.
I'm seeing this building that's
saying that there's a small building about probably 12 by 14. And she said there's water real close by.
What does it all mean? Could Stacy be showing Gail where to find her body?
Then I looked down, straight down, and the dirt was cracked. And I had never seen anything like this before.
She was like in her own little world, but if she wasn't in no trance, she just basically was walking around the room and just talking. I started thinking that she's actually right there.
But Gail St. John is picking up more than just visions.
Along with voice and showing me pictures, that she was impressing with feelings. It was almost a like rope or something around the wrist, and it really felt that hot burning when it went into me. I actually saw everything just go black around me.
Gail believes Stacy was murdered, bound and shot in the back of the head.
But there's a lot of things you try not to go into as far as those details.
Whether she was real, it was an act, whether I having the skepticism that I had, and being 2,000 miles away or 1,800 miles away, I just didn't know. I couldn't say it was for real or it wasn't at that point in time. Later on, that's a different story, but right then
Back in Tempe, Arizona, Detective Reed's investigation continues. He has few leads, but forensics have unearthed one important clue. Whoever forced their way into Stacy's apartment left fingerprints behind. Maybe someone in Stacy's apartment complex saw something.
Have you heard anything unusual in the last several hours?
No.
Reed gets lucky. Stacy's neighbor across the hall witnessed the break-in.
Pushing on the door and banging on the door.
Who was this mysterious intruder? Did he kill Stacy as the psychic believes? The disappearance of a 21-year-old college student in Tempe, Arizona sends a desperate father to a psychic. But what she sees, he doesn't want to hear. She tells him his daughter is already dead. But police believe Stacy Hendrickson has been abducted and could still be alive. Now they've found a witness who could lead them to Stacy.
He hears the sound of steps coming up to this second-floor apartment. And as he is awake, he hears some pounding on the door. So he looks through the peephole and he sees this young white male, approximately 25 years old, banging on the door.
Banging on it, there's no answer or anything, so finally
He tries forcing open the door with his shoulder, with his hands, and then does a little drop kick and then makes entry. What concerned me is the neighbor doesn't call the police. Told me that it was his opinion that this was a boyfriend-girlfriend dispute. He didn't want to get involved. He told me that the person that entered was a white male, clean-cut looking, and was wearing a very distinctive black T-shirt. And he said that this had on it a skull.
In Ohio, Roland is desperate to find out anything about his daughter, so he calls Detective Reed and tells him about Gail St. John and her strange visions. At first, his request falls upon deaf ears.
I considered psychics and stuff that they did, the word I use is mumbo-jumbo. As a cop, I have to look at hard, plain facts. And so, as a courtesy, and it was a courtesy to Raleigh, we contacted Gail St. John.
Would this be the phone call that would change the course of Detective Reed's investigation?
I was so busy, and I was so not wanting to waste my time. I gave Gail's number to a partner that was working this case with me. I asked him to call.
I kind of felt the skepticism.
Gail tells Reed's partner where they'll find Stacy's body. She describes palm trees to the south, a chain-link fence, cracked dirt, a small corrugated shed with a slanted roof. And then she tells the detective something she hasn't told Roland. Gail believes Stacy was murdered, shot in the back of the head.
When I first told him that you're dealing with a murder rather than an abduction, he was kind of hesitant.
But Detective Reed is not about to turn his missing persons investigation into a homicide based on the word of someone who claims to talk to dead people.
The information she had given to us was useless. It didn't lead us anywhere. We couldn't put that information out on a police radio or even begin to look anywhere. And at this point, we don't even have a body. We don't even have a victim.
You know, there is really no convincing someone that you're right or you're wrong. You have to let things fall into place. If I tell you something and then later it happens, then it fell into place, now you understand, you believe.
2 days later, after the call, something does happen. Something that will change Reed's skepticism forever. A city worker finds a body in a dumpster next to the Tempe Canal.
This was just another routine, if you will, death call for me. But as I drove down that canal road, I start to remember, all right, now, Gail said it was near water. Well, the canal's full of water. I get out of my police car and I see palm trees to the south. I look down and I'm walking on cracked earth. And oh my gosh, I see a rolling machine, which is a conveyor belt. And this machine specifically removes debris from the canal as it floats down and places that debris into a dumpster. The hair on the back of my neck was just standing straight up because everything that Gail had told the police, it was like a picture. It couldn't be a better match.
When police remove the body, it's so badly decomposed from the hot sun and water that a photo ID is impossible. Was the psychic right? Is Stacy dead, and could this be her body? The disappearance of a 21-year-old college student sends her father to a psychic. Gail St. John tells him his daughter is already dead. Police believe she could still be alive, but when a body is discovered in a canal, just as the psychic predicted, the lead detective begins to take her visions seriously.
Even though I could not make a positive ID of her at that point, based on what Gail said, in my heart I knew that this was Stacy Hendrickson.
One other clue convinces Reed the body is Stacy's. Something Gail St. John said.
And as I picked Stacy's body up, I could see that she had ligature marks on her wrist and that she had been bound. And she was x-rayed, and it was apparent from the x-ray that she had been shot in the head. And at that point, I became somewhat of a convert to the information and the gift or the ability that Gail St. John had.
A hard-boiled detective is now a believer, and with a killer on the loose, he wonders what else Gail St. John knows. Can the psychic really help the cop find Stacy's killer?
I can't tell you how astounded I am. I do have a killer out there, and the information you gave us was accurate.
I think he, at that point, dropped his skepticism and was more open to saying, okay, now I see what you said was right. Where do we go from here?
The next day, Stacy's father flies to Arizona to help ID the body of his daughter. He has yet to see how accurate Gail was.
I was hoping it wasn't Stacy. That's what my guts was saying.
Still waiting for dental records to make a positive ID, Detective Reed shows Roland 3 earrings that he recovered from the body.
I had bought her 3 diamond studs, and they graduated from small to a medium to a little bit bigger. And she was minus an ear on the one side, but this ear had these 3 diamonds in it. And that was a very identifying thing to me.
Detective Reed takes Roland to the bleak spot where his daughter was found.
When we got there, he was amazed. He was amazed at what he saw, that were really exactly as Gail had said.
I drill on that constantly. To have to come and find your daughter or your son in a situation like this where they wind up basically, dumped in a dumpster like garbage. It's pretty hard to take. It just...
Once we had recovered Stacy's body, I can't begin to describe the pressure then that begins.
Just as Gail St. John predicted, Detective Reed has a homicide on his hands. Reed now follows up on dozens of leads, but none lead to a suspect. The psychic was right about where Stacy's body would be found and the terrible way in which she died.
Detective Reed,
Days after discovering the body, Reed gets a disturbing call from Gail.
I really feel panic. I feel panic.
She says the killer is about to strike again.
the same guy that killed Stacy is going to kill again. Who's he going to kill? Virginia. I mean, she's real specific.
I'm feeling terrible panic now. Stacy's just going wild here. trying to describe what's happening and what's going to happen, and the roommate's life is in danger. She's going to go see this guy, and she's just going so fast. I'm trying to absorb it, and of course, the detectives are you still there? Yeah, but I'm trying to listen to your conversation and hers. And sometimes you feel like you're halfway between two worlds.
And part of me goes, this is pretty outlandish. The other part of me says, you know what? I can't disregard it. Look what happened when we went to the scene and found all those things she said.
Reed heeds Gail's warning and asks Virginia, Stacy's roommate, to come down to the station. Gail has also told him that Virginia knows the killer and is reluctant to make him a suspect.
And about an hour ago. And then I look at her in the eyes, and I said, I just got a call from Gail St. John. And she says that the same person who took the life of your friend is going to kill you tonight.
In Tempe, Arizona, a missing persons case has become a full-scale homicide investigation. Eerily, psychic Gail St. John predicted that 21-year-old Stacy Hendrickson had been murdered days before police found her body. Now, Gail is warning police that the killer is about to kill again. She says that Stacy's spirit has told her that the next victim will be her roommate, Virginia.
I tell her that Stacy's father had contacted a lady who has a gift. And as I'm talking to Virginia, I'm placing the Polaroids in front of her. And then I look at her in the eyes, and I said, I just got a call from Gail St. John. And she says that the same person who took the life of your friend is going to kill you tonight. And when I said those words, the blood drained out of her face. She turned white, and she teared up. And I'll never forget, she immediately said to me, check out John, check out John.
John Adams is a 26-year-old manager of a local fast food restaurant. Adams met both Stacy and her roommate just a few weeks before Stacy was killed. Incredibly, Virginia has a date with him that very night. With no time to lose, Reed tracks down Adams at his workplace. If Gail is right, this man's prints should match the set left on Stacy's door.
He was very cordial, and he was very cooperative. He told me that he knew Stacy. He told me that he was dating Virginia. I saw no sign of emotion from him. I asked him if he could assist me in the investigation by allowing me to take his photograph and also to take a sample of his fingerprints.
The prints turn out to be a perfect match, but that's not enough to charge Adams. There's no murder weapon, and nothing as yet that links him to the shooting.
And Gail St. John she's done her job, and it's now my job to build a factual case of things that people understand in court that I can use to put him away.
Reed's hard work finally pays off. Adams does own a skull t-shirt that matches the one the neighbor saw the man banging on Stacy's door wearing. Not only that, but it turns out that Adams had recently bought a gun, the same caliber as the murder weapon. Armed with the new evidence, Reed pulls Adams in for questioning. Once again, Gail St. John's eerie predictions are confirmed.
So everything is now just adding up. Everything points to John Adams. And I need to convince him to make this right, to tell the truth. We began the interview and talking about, really, John. In the back of my mind is a warning that I received from Gail St. John. And she has told me I need to be very careful with him. John is full of rage and anger, but she tells me that he can change from this nice, courteous young man to a raging bull. I need you to know that... And at a certain point in the interview, I could tell that John was ready to talk. John began to weep. He did tell me at that point that he did kill Stacy Hendrickson. He did what? That this was a murder, and I would have to charge him with a murder. In the twinkling of an eye, and becomes this raging bull and attacks me. No! No! Again, what Gail St. John had said was true. This man attacked me.
John Adams is charged with the murder of Stacy Hendrickson, and he eventually makes a full confession. In court, the final terrible moments of Stacy's last night alive were revealed. On July 22nd at 2 a.m., Adams arrived at Stacy's apartment, fueled on drugs and alcohol. He banged on the door, kicked it in, and chased Stacy into the bedroom. There he shot her in the back of the head, her pillow muffling the sound of the bullet and the bedsheets catching the spray of blood. Adams then wrapped her body in the blood-stained sheets and dumped the evidence in the Tempe Canal. Days later, it was siphoned from the water and deposited in a dumpster, the exact location described by Gail St. John.
I went on to work homicide almost 10 years, and in those 10 years, I never, ever dealt again with someone like Gail St. John.
Stacy saved her roommate's life. That's what it boils down to. If she hadn't said it to me, if she hadn't got that across to me, then we would have had another murder.
In court, Adams pleads guilty to manslaughter and is sentenced to 29 years in jail.
I figure you'd have to be a little crazy to do something like that, but I don't know how they feel. What promotes them thoughts to do things like that to some innocent person. After all, she was in her room bed, sleeping. She wasn't bothering anybody. So, you know, why?
In southern Louisiana, someone is killing the elderly. A psychic 4,000 miles away says she can see the killer.
I saw that he was wearing gloves and that he was very anxious, and he was looking for a way to get in.
They knew they were getting beaten, and they knew they were going to die. It was horrific, the manner in which he beat and killed human beings.
There was a lot of fear going around a community that a lot of people thought they might be the next victim.
Can a psychic's paranormal insights help police stop a psychopath before he kills again? Ascension Parish, a small slice of Cajun country deep in southern Louisiana. Within the parish, the small city of Gonzales, a peaceful community of friends and neighbors that prides itself on being the jambalaya capital of the world. It's a place where no one worries about keeping the doors locked at night. But in April of 1997, that peace was shattered.
So I was on duty at the time and heard a report over the radio of a possible homicide that occurred within the city of Gonzales.
Police are shocked to discover that Lillian Philippe, a 71-year-old widow, has been brutally murdered in her home. It's the first homicide victim in Gonzales in 11 years.
It's so beyond what you expect that when a situation like that happens, it just goes beyond your range of feelings there.
She was scheduled to go on a church bus trip to a casino about an hour and a half drive away. And she was very prompt all the time. If she said she was going to be at 8 o'clock, she was there at 7:45. She did not show up.
Gonzales Police Chief Bill Landry is one of the first to arrive at the crime scene.
She was on the floor and at the foot of her bed. It's obvious that a knife was used in the attack. There were noticeable stab wounds and some defensive wounds on her hands. There was very little trace evidence that was left at the scene.
The coroner on the case, Alfredo Suarez, is unsettled by the brutality of the killing.
She sustained multiple stab wounds to the neck area. Both jugular veins were severed by the deep stab wounds to that area. Furthermore, the larynx was partially severed, as well as the right lobe of the thyroid gland. In essence, she bled to death, and at the time, in that town of Gonzales, this was a horrifying death because the people in that town are not used to this kind of violent, brutal, bloody death.
Miss Leon's death caused a lot of concern because their quiet neighborhoods were now infiltrated with someone who had committed a murder. I mean, there was a lot of fear going around the community that a lot of people thought they might be the next victim.
But what the people of Gonzales don't know is even more terrifying. The death of Lillian Philippe is the third murder committed in the past 6 months along the airline highway. A highway that cuts through Ascension Parish, connecting Baton Rouge to New Orleans. Victor Rossi, the first victim, was beaten to death with a baseball bat. The second, Barbara Bourgeois, was stabbed to death.
Every time something like that happens, you lose a little bit of your innocence. And yes, it certainly we certainly lost our innocence during these events here.
3 bodies in 6 months. Each victim was elderly and attacked in their own home, but police are stuck.
But we were running into dead ends. It seemed like every suspect we may have come up with was eliminated.
Then Chief Landry receives a telephone call that will alter the course of the investigation.
I had received a call from a high school classmate of mine, Marcia.
Marcia lives in Honolulu, Hawaii. She is the niece of Lillian Philippe. She asks Chief Landry to consult with her friend Rose Kopp, a psychic.
It was suggested to him that I might be able to help.
Marcia had some concerns because they didn't know if the possibility if it was just a group of friends, the families that were friends together. They didn't know who was a target. She was concerned for the welfare of her family and just the welfare of Miss Lee, and to want to know if we were able to detect who had committed the crime.
Frustrated with the case, Chief Landry is willing to try anything, even a psychic.
I told him that I had worked on cases before and that I might be able to identify to some degree the perpetrator of the crime and might be able to offer some clues or hints into the investigation. I asked Chief Landry to send me a photograph of the victim and a small personal item of hers. And the photographs of people actually tell me things. I look into the eyes, and it's a matter that transcends physical reality. Once I see a person's photograph and touch an object that belongs to them, I'm able to connect better with the target.
But before the photo reaches Hawaii, the killer strikes again, this time a double homicide. Once again, the airline highway, just down the road from the home of Lillian Philippe. Seniors Sam and Luella Arcuri have been bludgeoned to death in their home. Then 5 days later, another killing. Joan Brock, 55, is beaten to death in her backyard. All signs point to a serial killer stalking the most helpless citizens of Ascension Parish. Although the body count is rising fast, police have very little information. The crime scene reveals nothing. No fingerprints, no DNA. In Honolulu, Rose Kopp is already on the case. Like a shaman or a medicine man, Rose enters a trance where she claims to be able to travel to the scene of the crime.
Shamanic journey is a trance that's induced by repetitive sound. Slowly, by just focusing on the sound of it, your brain waves alter. and you feel very light. So I move out of body, flew over Diamond Head, over the Pacific Ocean. My intention was to go to Miss Lillian's house. I flew over California, Texas, and went to Louisiana, and I ended up standing in the carport, and I turned around and I looked over my right shoulder, and there was so much blood all over the place.
What Rose Kopp sees is shocking, but is it enough to find Lillian Philippe's killer? It's 1997, and the sleepy southern town of Gonzales, Louisiana, has been rocked by the brutal murder of 71-year-old widow Lillian Philippe.
It just goes beyond your range of feeling.
Gonzales Police Chief Bill Landry has connected the killing to 5 others in the area.
I mean, there was a lot of fear going around the community that a lot of people thought they might be the next victim. And you had to really keep everybody happy and make sure that they saw patrol cars and they saw officers around. And so it was the assurance that we had to give as a law enforcement community, had to give the public to know that they could still be safe in a community that was stricken with a serial murderer.
Police have few clues, but Chief Landry has made a connection of the most unusual kind. Rose Kopp, a psychic thousands of miles away in Hawaii, claims to be able to see the killer.
I saw that he was wearing gloves, and his hands were in fists, and so I got the kinesthetic impression that he was very anxious, and he was looking for a way to get in.
Gloves would explain the lack of fingerprints found at the crime scene.
I saw him as a Caucasian male, and about 5'9", and he had brown hair. He was very strong. So he went around to the side of the house, and I saw him move a wrought iron chair from the porch area and move that on top of the air conditioning vent and then stand up on it. And then it stopped. My vision stopped.
And the first thing she told me was that he placed a chair on top of an air conditioning unit and actually climbed onto the roof of the home.
Chief Landry is stunned by what Rose tells him. There is no way she could have known about that chair.
Entrance was apparently gained through a vent through the roof of the house, and then ultimately entered the residence through attic stairs.
He was like a snake, like an anaconda, or those snakes that wrap around you, and he just seized on her and was stabbing her in the neck, in the throat, and there was so much blood all over the place. And I recall her trying to get him off of her, and she couldn't. He was too wiry and strong. She couldn't get him off her. And I just saw all the blood all over the pillow and on the bed.
Somehow Rose Kopp has seen details of the crime scene known only to police. With the pressure mounting, local authorities team up, creating a joint task force to oversee the investigation.
The task force was composed of St. John, the Sheriff's Department, St. James, Ascension Parish Sheriff's Department, and the City of Gonzales to try and collect all information.
District Attorney Charles Long monitors the task force.
The task force thought it wise to consult the FBI Child Abduction and Serial Killer Unit in Quantico, Virginia. After the FBI profiling was done, it was learned that all of the crimes, both in St. John, St. James, and Ascension and City of Gonzales, were probably done by a single killer.
Now, certain he's dealing with a serial killer, Chief Landry once again contacts Rose Kopp.
And he asked me if I would go back and see what his motives were, if I could give a more detailed description of him.
Rose takes another shamanic journey to the crime scene.
I flew over to Louisiana again, and I landed by Miss Lillian's house. And I turned around and I looked over my right shoulder, and the dark-colored sedan was there. I moved inside the car, and I noticed on the floor of the car were gambling slips, lots of papers and betting slips and things like that.
Amazingly, Rose's vision matches with what investigators believe is fueling the killing spree.
We thought that robbery was the motive. There was no other reason to consider why someone would prey upon Miss Philippi. We knew from other cases that there was some large amount of money missing, which we felt might be for a gambling habit.
Rose also says she sees someone new, the killer's girlfriend.
And I saw her in a place serving food. So I realized she was a waitress, so I looked to see her name tag. And I wasn't sure if it was Brandy or Cindy or Candy. And then I wanted to know where the restaurant was where she worked. So I looked out the window. I'm invisible all this time, huh? And I looked out the window, and I saw a fairly large building. And I smelled blood. And then suddenly I saw a severed cow's head. And it shocked me so badly that I came back immediately into my body. I was back in my living room. I don't even recall traveling back.
It's a bizarre psychic vision that transcends space and time, but it makes sense to Chief Landry.
Right off the top of my head, I knew exactly what she was talking about. It was a slaughterhouse. It was a regional slaughterhouse for cattle. And they had a big cow that stood up on top of a sign.
The slaughterhouse Rose can see was torn down years ago.
I mean, I got officers who didn't know that that sign existed at one time or another. I do remember it because as a kid I remember the slaughterhouse. And when she said, "I see a cow on a sign," it was right off the top of my head. I knew exactly what she was talking about.
But it's the psychic's final vision that will blow the case wide open.
And then I saw an old woman's hand, and I knew it was an old woman's hand because it was veiny and the skin, the knuckles were wrinkly. And she wrote, "River Rat."
River Rat. What could it mean? And how is it connected to the case?
River rat is a term that we would use for people who live along the Mississippi River corridor. Or when you get into different sections of South Louisiana, the slang, the accent is a little different, and you're able to tell where people are from based on their accent.
Chief Landry may know what a river rat is, but what he doesn't know is what it means for the case. That is, until the killer strikes again.
There was a couple that was attacked outside our jurisdiction around the July 4th weekend. The suspect entered the home through a utility room window, armed himself with a weapon of opportunity inside the home, shot the female in the facial area, and shot the husband in the chest area.
The elderly couple barely survived the attack, but their description of their assailant is what shocks Chief Landry.
And they asked Miss Joyce if she had any description of the suspect, and she wrote on a piece of paper, "River Rat."
Gonzales police now know they are hunting for a river rat, but can they catch him before he strikes again?
There was something going on besides robbery. He woke them up in the middle of the night. They knew they were getting beaten, and they knew they were going to die.
A serial killer is on the loose in Ascension Parish, Louisiana. 6 elderly victims have been murdered, including 71-year-old Lillian Philippe. Though police believe robbery is the motive, they're disturbed by the viciousness of the attacks.
You've got your whole community in fear of who's next. When you go into somebody's house, that's Man's house is his castle. And when you're robbing the castle and killing the king and the queen, you got a problem. From the sheriff's department's point of view, from the district attorney's point of view, trying to prosecute somebody and bring them to justice, and trying to calm the community. So I would say in my years of 15 years as a prosecutor, that was some of the worst. You know, we've had some other disputes, but nothing of this magnitude.
Gonzales Police Chief Bill Landry is working on the case alongside psychic Rose Kopp.
And then I saw an old woman's hand, and she wrote, River Rat.
The latest victim has survived the killer's assault. She gives police a physical description of her attacker and also describes him as a river rat, slang for people who live along the Mississippi corridor. Now, using the FBI profile and the victim's description, police create a composite of the suspect and release it to the public. Again, Chief Landry is struck by the accuracy of the psychic's visions.
The description Rose had given me was very, very close in the physical features to the composite we ultimately got.
Only 5 days after the composite is released, there's a major break in the case.
There was someone who came forward to say, look, I know this guy. He's been spending a lot of money in a casino.
The witness identifies a resident of Gonzales, a man named Daniel Blank.
When you gamble, you have that little cord you put in a slot machine, or it tracks not only your earnings, but your losses also. It tells you how much you spent as compared to how much you've actually won.
And they gathered substantial information about, $80,000, $100,000 worth of gambling that he was doing at all of these casinos.
And you compare that with what you thought his salary would be for a self-employed mechanic, and it just didn't add up. Then you look at what associations Daniel may have had with each victim, and there was some relationship with auto parts, maybe a friend of the family. Everything just started really funneling right toward Daniel Blank.
Police go looking for Daniel Blank at his last known address.
Task force decided that, well, we're going to pick him up for questioning. He's got some, we checked on his earnings and his losses at the casino. He's going to have to show us some paperwork as to where these finances came from. We began looking for him and learned that he had ultimately just recently had moved to Onalaska, Texas. And so we contacted the authorities in Onalaska and sent our task force to Texas to further the investigation.
In Onalaska, Texas, investigators find Daniel Blank and question him about the murders.
It was a very long interview. I think it was approximately a 12-hour interview. And when he finally began to confess, of course, they went through each one of the crimes that were committed in detail, like a separate mini interview within the 12-hour interview.
That's when I hit her with it. With what? With the thing, whatever it was, I had it in my hand.
During his interrogation, Daniel Blank admits to all 6 murders, including that of Lillian Philippe. Police also pick up the mysterious Cindy from Rose's visions.
We discovered Cindy and learned that Cindy was actually Daniel Blank's girlfriend. And Cindy was the one Rose saw in the waitress outfit. Cindy worked at a little cafe. Daniel would frequent the cafe because there were video poker machines, gambling machines, and Daniel would, and I feel that's how Rose saw Cindy, but when she saw Cindy, Daniel would have been right inside gambling. So she actually saw them both there, but she only read Cindy's name, I think.
Police learn Cindy waitresses across the street from the site of the old slaughterhouse, just as Rose had envisioned. His girlfriend, Cindy Bellard, is released after making a deal to cooperate with prosecutors. In his confession, Blank reveals the brutal details of his murder of Lillian Philippe. After using the wrought iron chair to gain access to the home, Daniel Blank attacked the elderly widow with a trophy, then stabbed her to death with a kitchen knife.
Daniel Blank, in his confession, indicated he stole approximately $100 from Miss Lillian Philippe's house. My conclusion was there was something going on besides robbery in the manner in which he beat people. He woke them up in the middle of the night, first of all. If you look at it, they knew they were getting beaten and they knew they were going to die. And for some reason, I feel he wanted them to know that they were going to get beaten to death. Because other than that, you could have just simply went in, stole what you wanted and leave out, or there were more humane ways. If you're going to kill somebody, there are more humane ways than to beat them with a baseball bat, beat them with a trophy, slice them with a knife, beat them with a briar hook, chop them up, or whatever he's trying to do.
2 years after the crime, on September 2nd, 1999, a jury finds Daniel Blank guilty of the first-degree murder of Lillian Philippe. He is sentenced to death.
The main factor to me was that he was taken off the streets. He was not going to harm anyone else, so that was satisfaction.
Despite being over 4,000 miles away in Honolulu, Hawaii, somehow Rose Kopp was able to tell investigators in Gonzales, Louisiana, remarkable details that at the time only the killer could have known. He did use a chair to break into Lillian's home. His girlfriend was a waitress named Cindy, and his appearance matches Rose's physical description of the killer. He had a gambling problem, and he was a river rat. For Ascension Parish, the conviction of Daniel Blank returns a sense of peace. For the family of Lillian Philippe, it means justice. And for Rose Kopp, it means vindication for the psychic powers even she finds inexplicable.
I'm surprised, happy, exhilarated, satisfied. I love catching bad guys.
Not to say that Rose had everything signed, sealed, and delivered, but I think Rose's journeys did aid us to ultimately get the right guy.
In Malvern, Arkansas, the son of a local police investigator is abducted at knife point.
I felt that somebody that I had either arrested or busted was getting back at me in some way.
But a massive manhunt fails to find him.
The first 24 hours are crucial because the longer it goes, the consequences are always worse.
His parents, desperate to save their son, ask a psychic for help.
She would keep assuring me that he was alive.
Can the psychic help to find Tyson before it's too late?
He was going to kill Tyson.
Malvern, Arkansas, a town of 9,000, is home to the world's largest brick factory. It's also home to 17-year-old Tyson Eford. A typical teenager in his last year of high school, he's passionate about basketball and his pickup truck. To pay for his first set of wheels, he also works part-time on the night shift at the local food center. His shift on November 14th, 1991 begins like any other until a man approaches Tyson and says that his beloved pickup has been hit in the parking lot. Telling the manager he'll be right back, Tyson follows the man out to investigate. He never returns. 30 minutes later, when the manager sees that Tyson's truck is still parked in the lot, he calls the police, and the police call Tyson's parents, Anita, a probation officer, and Henry Eford, a county sheriff.
We get to the parking lot, and his truck and his school books and stuff are still there. I knew something had happened, because he thought more of that truck than he did anything in the world, you know.
The next morning, Malvern wakes up to one of the largest manhunts in Arkansas history.
All law enforcement in Hot Spring County, Malvern, the city, the county, the state, everybody was out looking for him.
Chuck Hefner is the lead investigator for the Arkansas State Police.
When you have a father, no matter where he works, involved, you have to keep some distance. We did not cut him out because it's his family. He wants to be involved, and he's a police officer.
But the investigation has few leads, except for the night manager's sketchy description of the man he saw with Tyson, and another witness who saw a scuffle in the parking lot. The Eford's only son has simply vanished.
They were hunting, they were looking, and I couldn't get no feedback. No feedback. None. It's just like somebody had come in and taken him off the earth.
2 days pass, and police fail to uncover a single new clue. His abduction is a complete mystery.
I think even the police even thought that there would be a ransom call in, but there wasn't.
I didn't feel like it would ever be a ransom. I felt like that it was revenge against me. In fact, deep down, I just knew that I would find him dead.
You'll always look for a child that's alive. That's what you're looking for. You hope you don't find the other, but that's not what you're looking for until there is some evidence to point you in that direction. And we didn't have anything to point us in that direction, so we were still looking for Tyson to be alive somewhere.
Just bring my son home, or tell me where I can go get him anywhere, anything that you want.
But with no evidence, the odds of finding Tyson alive are fading by the hour.
At that point, the parent was more than police officer. I would have done anything, you know, to get my son back.
I love him. He is our only son.
Then, out of desperation, Anita Eford's brother makes a suggestion.
We love him.
And I said, "Who's Carol Payton?" He said, "She's a psychic in Little Rock." He said, "I've used her a couple of times." And I said, "Yes." I said, "You do whatever you need to do. Get her down here."
And I said, "Yes, of course, I'll help. But I need some things from him in order to touch into him, to find out what's happened to him."
Carol Pate learned as a young girl she had a psychic gift for finding missing people. Since then, she's been involved in hundreds of investigations.
I use psychometry. That is touching a photograph of an individual or of a place, or handwriting and ink, touching that. And it's like tuning in a radio station. I see what they see. I feel what they feel. I think what they're thinking primarily.
3 days after Tyson's disappearance, Carol Pate drives from Little Rock to Malvern to meet the Efords.
She wanted something of his that was personal, that no one else had worn or touched or really anything. And I said, "Well, I've got a shoe." And she said, "Yes, I can focus in on him. Do you have a recent picture of him?"
So they brought me a photograph, and they brought me his shoe, and I sat down at the table, and I quietly touched into both. And the first thing that I got was he was alive. Tyson's alive. That was wonderful.
But Carol also tells Anita she is visualizing the whole abduction, just as Tyson had experienced it.
I saw the whole thing immediately. I saw the men, I saw the man in camouflage, I saw the truck. It happened very quickly.
Now Carol asks Anita to take her to the crime scene.
I got in touch with Henry, and I told him that I had Carol with me, and we met him at the parking lot.
Henry Eford's conscience is torn. As a cop, he deals in hard evidence. As a father, he's willing to try anything.
I get Tyson coming out of the front of the store at the parking lot. I got a better visual of the abductors. I got a better visual of the way they went out and how they grabbed him and how they forced him into the truck. There's a man that grabs him, the man that told him that the truck had been hit. He throws him inside the truck.
I call myself a halfway decent investigator. I'm getting information that nobody else had ever got. We didn't even know which direction he had went in, other than he went out the back of the parking lot.
They drive. They went that way, right out through the back, and to the left.
Will the psychic's visions turn out to be true and help Tyson's family find him before it's too late? In Malvern, Arkansas, a massive search has failed to find 17-year-old kidnap victim Tyson Eford. After 2 frustrating days of no leads, his parents ask psychic Carol Pate to help them find their son. At the crime scene, the parking lot of a local grocery store, Carol has a vision that Tyson is still alive. She claims she can even see where his abductors have taken him.
They went that way, and they turned left.
She said something to me about, "I'll see a ridge." And I thought maybe she was talking about a mountain or a ridge or hill or something. And she said, "No, it's a road." And I said, "There's a ridge road."
Yes, that's it, Ridge Road. They took him down Ridge Road. They don't live far from Ridge Road. They took him to a house.
Tyson's father, a county sheriff, asks Carol to lead him to the location where she believes his son is being held.
And it was like I was following a trail of energy. And I started getting the details on the house. The house was small, white. It didn't look like a house. It looked different.
And she carried me straight down. We hit the end of the blacktop and went into the gravel.
The energy stopped. And I couldn't tell which way to go.
And she told me, she said, "I've lost it."
But it was like there was a wall there, and I couldn't go any farther. And we weren't supposed to go any farther.
Despite Carol's frustrating psychic dead end, Henry and Anita are convinced she holds the key to finding their boy.
This was the first information that we had gotten.
Nobody was coming up with anything. And in me talking with Carol, I was feeding that information to them.
So anything that he would give us, we would look into, because he knew the area well.
One promising lead is Carol's description of where Tyson is being held, a simple white house or a hunting trailer, popular in this rural area.
He had told us that she could see him in a building like a deer camp. That focused all of the investigation on buildings and deer camps and stuff. We searched deer camps in Clark County, Hot Spring County, Dallas County. In other words, what she was telling me, the whole investigation was in a roundabout way of swinging to what she had said, because we had no other leads.
But even though Henry is a respected local cop, not everyone involved in the investigation is happy that the Efords have asked a psychic for help.
None of the police would work with me any way, shape, or form. I had to work directly with the Efords. That was the only way.
And we had some of the officers, one officer, elected officer, that said it was the work of the devil. Well, that's his belief. But I'm an investigator. I take anything that I can get a hold of to try to get to the bottom of the case.
The Efords and Carol Pate agree to keep in constant contact. Carol will try to connect psychically with Tyson every day and report what she sees or senses.
I checked on Tyson every single day. I was in contact with the parents every single day. I would give them information that I was seeing, and I knew he wasn't far from where I lost the energy trail.
I wanted to believe that he was still alive and that we would find him. She would keep assuring me that he was alive.
The psychic is sure Tyson is not dead, although some of her visions are deeply disturbing.
He was very frightened. I knew that he was being abused.
She talked about Russian roulette, where they hold a gun to your head and pull the trigger, and that they were doing that to Tyson, but she said he's still alive.
I felt the gun against my head, or Tyson's head. It was a bizarre feeling.
According to Carol's dark, disturbing visions, there are two men who abducted Tyson. One wears cowboy boots and a unique belt buckle, but he disappears from her psychic view. The other man is always there, always has a gun in his hand, and never takes his eyes off Tyson. But there are some visions that Carol does not dare tell the parents.
The man raped Tyson on several occasions. There was a lot of brutality. There was a lot of...
5 days have passed since Tyson disappeared without a trace. Apart from the psychic's visions, there are still no new clues.
I was just wore completely out. I was done to the point that I couldn't think straight. I was to the point that I had to have closure somewhere because I figured Tyson was dead.
He kept saying, you know, you got to, be prepared for this. You got to be prepared. And I said, I'm not going to be prepared for it. He's still alive. And I said, we got to find him.
And then, suddenly, the psychic's visions turned even darker.
There was a total shift, and I knew that Tyson had maybe 24 hours, that this man was going to do something.
I remember her calling and saying that, we've got to find him because...
She said something about a grave.
In Carol's vision, Tyson is dragged from the house, taken to a field, shown 3 graves, and forced to kneel down in one of them. Then the man points a gun at his head.
It was very strong, very powerful, and I was very afraid for him.
That night, Carol holds a psychic vigil. A powerful psychic tool she believes could stop Tyson Eford from being killed.
I recognize that my psychic abilities are gifts through God, and I ask and I pray for help, and I do it in the name of Jesus Christ, and it has never failed me, ever. Lord God, we ask at this time for the safe return of Tyson Eford, that there be no harm done to him, no harm to anyone involved. And we ask this now in the name of our Lord and Master, Jesus Christ.
The same night, around 2 a.m., Malvern police get an unexpected phone call. The Efords' prayers are answered.
I said, my name's Tyson Eford. I've been released.
Against all odds, Tyson Eford has been let go, released on a lonely stretch of highway just a mile from his house.
And he reached over to me and said, can we be friends? Of course, I shook his hand to get out of a situation I was in. And I ran as fast as I could to the nearest house.
I didn't even stop in the road. I just went straight through the yard and went right up to the porch.
And then when I saw Tyson, I got out of the car. And so he grabbed Tyson, and I grabbed him. And, of course, I was crying and all upset, and I had my baby back.
Tyson's parents take him directly to the hospital. On the way, he talks about his abduction, a story that is both horrifying and chillingly familiar.
After I get Tyson in the unit, he and Nita was in the back seat. And he went and told me, he said, "Daddy, he raped me."
Tyson's story is so horrific. His parents are grateful that he's alive to tell it. But it's also so bizarre, the police are finding it hard to believe. A massive manhunt involving the FBI, state and local police, and hundreds of volunteers can't find 17-year-old Tyson Eford. But 6 days after his abduction, he's suddenly released in the middle of the night near his house.
This highway right here is Highway 9. This is where I was dropped off when I was released. And I ran to the nearest house down this road right here.
Like the family, the police are relieved and amazed Tyson is still alive. But the story he tells is so horrifying, it's hard for the police to accept.
Myself and an FBI agent interviewed him for about 5 hours. I needed more information to corroborate what he was telling us.
They said, there's no way he could have gone through what he went through and survived.
The police may be skeptical about Tyson's dark tale, but remarkably, it matches exactly with Carol Pate's psychic visions.
There was questions that I did ask him. I said, was there any guns? And he said they stuck it up to my head. They put a bullet in it, and they kept pulling the trigger. I said, Henry, that's what Carol told us about the Russian roulette.
I didn't know how she would know that. Only I would know that because I was the only one going through it.
What Tyson went through, I experienced to a lesser degree, but nevertheless I experienced it physically. I could feel it physically. That's why I would disconnect. It was extremely painful.
And then I asked him, I said, did one of them wear cowboy boots? And he said, yeah, Kevin Scott wore boots. And from the way I understood, she was seeing this through Tyson's eyes.
I saw the men, I saw the man in camouflage, I saw the belt buckle. But Tyson, I think being the son of police officers, took notice of everything around him.
To confirm Tyson's story and bring the kidnappers to justice, the police need to find the men fast. Tyson gives them a lead, a name he saw on a letter in the house where he was held. Within hours, 35-year-old Carl Meany is arrested. The psychic predicted that Carl Meany's house where Tyson was held was close to Ridge Road. In fact, it was a mere 500 yards.
It amazes me. It amazes me how close she was, how close she got to the house where I was.
Carl Meany's address confirms even more of Carol's visions. His house is small, white, and located in the country. And the route that Carol saw the kidnappers take leads right to the door.
There's 2 ways to go. But how did she know which road I was on? Why didn't she go somewhere in the city? It's amazing.
This is the crossroads off of Ridge Road, where Carol Pate lost the scent right here. She didn't know which way to go, either right that way or left that way. But they went left. If they would have went right, they would have went right to the house.
Meany's address confirms Carol's psychic vision and how close she was to actually finding Tyson. Was she also right about him being in mortal danger? And how close did she come to saving his life? On the 5th day of his abduction, Tyson remembers Meany tying him up and then leaving to go to town. He returns, edgy and upset, and tells Tyson,
Your pictures everywhere, all over the stores, all over the store I went to. Obviously, there's a lot of people looking for you. And I think it really freaked him out where he's going to have to do something today.
He was going to kill Tyson. That was my feeling.
Later that night, He took me out, and he had a gun, a pistol, on him. Walked across the pasture. I seen 3 holes.
I told the parents about the man taking him out and showing him the 3 graves.
I never prayed much before, and I just prayed to the Lord that he would not kill me.
When I realized that Tyson was going to die that night, I had to do something. I had to.
On the night of the 5th day of Tyson's abduction, Carol Pate holds her psychic prayer vigil.
Do I have your agreement for the safe return of Tyson Eford?
I agree.
I agree.
I said, please don't do this to me. Please don't kill me. He says, I've got to kill you.
Be released?
I said, I promise I will not tell anybody where I've been. Just please let me go.
In the name of our Lord and Master, Jesus Christ.
And then I guess something keyed, his conscience keyed into him, said, I'll let you go.
We're on the road right in front of Carl Meany's house, where that night before he let me go, he took me across to a pasture out there where 3 holes were dug. I think he had every intentions to kill me, and I think something triggered in him where the Lord spoke to him and told him not to do this.
What did make Carl Meany decide to spare Tyson and let him go? Whatever the truth, the Eford family believes it was the psychic's prayer circle.
And by Carol having the prayer circle, that's talking to God. I believe that that's what got him back to us safe.
Yes, the good Lord was looking over. Because those people were crazy enough to kill him.
I ask and I pray for help, and I do it in the name of Jesus Christ, and it has never failed me.
Tyson and his parents are amazed at the uncanny accuracy of Carol's psychic visions, but the police remain skeptical of Tyson's story until they get another bizarre surprise. The second kidnapper, Kevin Scott, turns himself in.
And then Scott, whenever he turned state evidence, it backed everything Tyson said.
It was a bizarre setup by Carl Meany to use not only Tyson, but to use his own friend as part of his ploy.
Finally, Tyson's story of his abduction is fully confirmed. It was Scott who grabbed him at knife point in the parking lot while Meany drove. He was taken to a small white house in the country where the men played Russian roulette. Meany had fooled Scott, telling him that Tyson was vandalizing his property and needed a scare. But after Scott left, the real reason Meany had abducted Tyson became clear.
They're all playing tricks on Tyson, and Meany's playing tricks on everybody else. Very, very bizarre man, Carl Meany.
With the testimony of Tyson Eford and Kevin Scott, Carl Meany receives 3 life sentences for the brutal kidnap and will spend the rest of his days in prison. Today, Tyson still lives in Malvern. He's married and drives a forklift for a living. He will never forget those 6 horrific days here on Ridge Road, nor a psychic's role in helping his family find him.
I don't know much about psychics, but I know that she gave my parents hope that I was still alive.
Tyson's alive. He's alive.
He was our only son, and she was going to do whatever she could to help us and to assure me that he was still alive.
She had been telling us the truth. She is somebody we'll never forget.
A Vancouver area nightclub owner vanishes into thin air.
I felt something was very, very wrong.
Police think he's fled town for a new life under a new identity.
He's probably someone who has gone missing and does not want to be found.
But a psychic sees things differently.
I felt that there was foul play.
And his fiancée refuses to believe he'd ever leave her.
It's like he was like the closest person to me. No way.
Can a psychic help a desperate woman solve the mystery of what happened to Bill Rudy?
I certainly didn't feel like he slipped in the bathtub.
On Canada's Wild West coast, Vancouver, British Columbia is one of the most exciting cities in the world, especially when the sun goes down. In the early 1990s, one of the area's hottest nightclubs was Rumors. Its owner was 51-year-old Bill Rudy. The multimillionaire has investments in nightclubs and real estate, and the cash is rolling in. And Bill Rudy lavished a lot of that money on his fiancée, Janet Bignell.
He used to like totally spoil me, and we'd go out, and everywhere we went, it was always like fun.
The couple were making plans together. Bill Rudy told Janet that he was ready to cash in his chips and start a new life with her in a small town east of Vancouver, near Janet's parents.
What we were going to do is actually liquidate everything and then move to Kelowna. Basically, because Bill and I were going to move, I no longer had my own house because we were going to be buying a new house.
It seemed like everything was falling into place for Bill and Janet. But then he does something odd. In February of 1994, Bill checks into a local motel, telling Janet he needs to sort out his tangled business affairs before he makes the final move.
He wanted just to take a week and sort all the tax things out and just have peace and quiet where nobody knew where he was.
On Monday evening, February 21st, Bill and Janet spoke on the phone.
He just said that he was just going to get something to eat and then he was going to go to bed. So he did call me that evening, and it was around 9 o'clock.
But the next day, she doesn't hear from him.
I paged him throughout the day, and nothing. Then that evening, we were supposed to go out for dinner. I had a babysitter booked for 6 o'clock, and still nothing.
2 days pass, and Janet still doesn't hear from Bill Rudy.
Just the knot in your stomach, I felt something was very, very wrong.
Desperately worried, she goes to the police, but they don't see the disappearance of Bill Rudy as a top priority.
One of them even said, well, obviously if it was a child, we would take it more seriously. But when they're adults, people can just go away.
But the police are obligated to do at least a routine investigation. They dig around a little and discover that Bill Rudy has one good reason to disappear.
Bill Rudy had an ex-wife who he was still having some problems with and issues.
And as they dig deeper, they begin to believe that Bill Rudy may be missing on purpose.
Rudy was planning to get out of the business, had taken care of his debts, and he was ready to move on.
But Janet refuses to believe that Bill would ever leave her.
People don't know him on a personal level. Sure, they may know him on a business level, but no way.
A fiancée is not quite the same as a wife, and there are many times where a girlfriend fiancée thinks that the relationship is maybe further along than it actually is.
But Janet had gone to Rudy's hotel room 4 days after he went missing. What she found convinced her this was not the room of a man who wanted to disappear.
I go into the room and everything is there. The closet's full of clothes, his toothbrush is in the glass, his razor is plugged in.
Distraught and now dissatisfied with the police investigation, Janet decides to call a psychic.
The motivation was to try to find out what happened to him. I totally believe in psychics, and obviously it wasn't going to hurt.
Janet's friends suggest she contact Laurie McQuarrie, a well-known psychic who lives in Portland, Oregon.
I liked her,
And I thought that this was a kind woman who was really in distress, and yet, even under all the stress, she was very, very driven. She was very focused on finding this answer, and I wanted to help her.
The psychic asks Janet to send her information on Bill Rudy right away.
I want a picture, a birth date, and a name, a map of the area where they were last seen.
Lori uses a psychic technique she calls victimology.
I can sit down and just looking at that picture, it's just focusing and allowing it to flow. And I get a story. I get a total story. And I just start writing.
And the story Lori is getting about Bill Rudy is deeply disturbing.
If I weren't a psychic, I would be going, well, gee, this looks like a businessman. And what came through was, we have two people here. We have a man who presents himself as being the honest businessman, and then we have the hidden side. How do you tell this poor girl that her missing fiancé is a really nasty man and I don't like him? But I said it.
I didn't want to believe her. Half of me is still skeptical. Well, okay, it's a psychic. It's not science.
When I said this is a bad man, I believe I recall her saying, I know. He's not perfect.
To Janet, Bill is the man she loves and plans to marry. But the psychic is onto something. The police have discovered that in his business life, Bill Rudy did have a hidden side.
Bill Rudy used a number of aliases in the past, mostly to cover on somewhat shady business deals and houses and mortgages and things. But it showed that he was not above manipulating and fudging the rules.
And Janet did know Bill Rudy had secrets. When they first met, he lied about his real name.
He told me his name was John Andrews. The reason he was using these names is so that his ex-wife couldn't track him, and I totally believed him.
A person who uses aliases is not the most honest person in the world, usually using those aliases to his advantage, to someone else's or the government's disadvantage.
But Janet is desperate to find out what happened to the love of her life. Now it seems the psychic is the only one who can help her.
She gave me positive encouragement. She was always available. I talked to her like many times throughout.
Not only has the psychic sensed that all is not what it seems with Bill Rudy, now she gives his fiancée some truly chilling news.
I knew he was gone. It's kind of like they say in the search and rescue world, it is no longer a rescue, it's a recovery.
You know, to me, he still could have been missing, but Lori said no, he's gone.
If the psychic is right, how did Bill Rudy die, and where is his body? Near Vancouver, British Columbia, nightclub owner Bill Rudy has vanished without a trace. The police think he's hiding and doesn't want to be found, but psychic Lori McQuarrie senses he's dead.
I knew he was gone.
Janet Bignell asks the psychic to come to Vancouver and help to solve the mystery of her missing fiancé.
It was like two forces coming together. She was anxious for me to come up, and I was hoping to put a piece to the puzzle.
Desperate to find Bill Rudy, for Janet, no price is too high. But Lori surprises her.
And I wouldn't have cared how much it cost, and she said no. She said, I don't take money for missing people. And I said, well, why not? And she goes, because then I would lose my gift.
But Lori does have a strange request.
She asked me to make a reservation at the hotel and in the same room from where Bill went missing.
Part of victimology for me is once I've gotten the initial facts, then if it's possible, I want to follow a physical route. I want to see physical surroundings that this person lived in or were around.
As soon as Lori arrives in Vancouver, she heads straight to the hotel. She checks into room 206, the room in which Bill Rudy stayed.
As I sat in the room, I could feel myself looking at maps on a bed, looking at papers, contracts, all the things that assembled his world.
In the room, alone, Lori tunes in again to Bill Rudy's fate. Not only is he dead, but she believes he's been murdered.
I felt that there was foul play. I certainly didn't feel like he slipped in the bathtub.
That was very painful for me to hear as well.
She wasn't all that shocked when I told her that I thought he had been murdered. I think, again, this had been simmering someplace in the back of her mind.
But the Royal Canadian Mounted Police aren't interested in working with psychics. In their eyes, Bill Rudy had deliberately disappeared.
You really can't take it to the homicide squad unless you have fairly good evidence that it's a homicide. In this case, we did not have a crime scene or a body.
Nevertheless, if the psychic is right, what did happen to Bill Rudy? Janet has her suspicions, and they all center around Rudy's business partner and Rumor's manager, David Lowe.
Bill didn't trust him anymore.
In a ploy to hide money from his ex-wife, Bill Rudy had put the Rumor's nightclub in David Lowe's name. In return, Lowe had been paying Rudy $5,000 cash a week for over 2 years. But just before he disappeared, the payments started coming up short.
It was the first time that Dave Lowe had not come up with all the money. He's like stalling him and giving him a lot of excuses.
Janet Bignell's word is not enough for the police. They need concrete evidence. For that, she hires Ozzie Caban, a private investigator, to watch and follow David Lowe.
Based on undercover operations, based on street talk and everything else, that was the guy of interest to us.
But even Ozzie can't uncover any new evidence, and Bill Rudy's secret life doesn't help.
We had an individual with about 6 different aliases, businesses all over the countryside. We realize that we're dealing with a situation here that, shall we say, is a little shady, a little on the dark side.
None of that, however, matters to Janet.
All I wanted to do is find out what happened to him.
To do that, she asks the psychic and the private eye to join forces. Maybe they can solve the puzzle of what happened to her fiancé. And Laurie thinks the best place to start is at the nightclub.
She wanted to see if she could feel Bill's energy, and I was scared to go.
Ozzie thinks it's too dangerous for Laurie to go alone, so he sends an undercover off-duty police officer to protect her. Laurie and the cop shoot pool, but her mind is not on the ball. Her psychic senses are telling her details of Bill Rudy's death.
I immediately knew that I was on the right track. Bill Rudy had died here. I knew it. I knew it beyond a shadow of a doubt.
She says she can see how Bill Rudy died. And she says it was a brutal murder.
I felt that there had been a blow to the back of the head. I didn't feel like he had a one-on-one confrontation knowing it was coming. I think it was up behind him and total surprise.
If Bill Rudy has been murdered like the psychic says, was it his business partner? And where on earth is Bill Rudy's body? The psychic believes his body has been dumped in the woods.
What I felt was really surrounding him as, laying there in whatever state he was in was definitely rural.
So Laurie and Janet hit the road in search of Bill Rudy.
She wasn't familiar with the area at all, and yet she's the one telling me which way to go.
Yes, I felt the sense, go left, go east, and that's what we did, and it felt right.
We kept driving, and she said, "Don't worry, he's going to be found." And looking at the map, and she says, "I believe he's in the back of Harrison area."
Psychic Laurie McQuarrie has never been to British Columbia before. Yet she marks an area on her map, sensing that Bill Rudy's body lies in the mountains to the east of Vancouver.
Whatever I pointed to, I felt strongly about it. And the problem always is, usually people aren't dumped on a sidewalk. They're dumped in acreage.
In fact, the area Laurie circles is the perfect place to hide a body. It's vast, rugged, and remote. They drive all day, but the psychic can't seem to zero in on the exact location of his remains.
I didn't think we were going to find him that day, but I would have been pretty excited if we had found his glasses or his jacket.
Though they come away from the wilderness empty-handed, the psychic is convinced her vision of Bill Rudy's fate is right. But 2 weeks later, there's another twist in the tale of Bill Rudy. His van is found, abandoned at Vancouver Airport. For the police, it's further evidence that he wanted to disappear.
And they said, well, we've located his vehicle. We found it at the airport. So obviously he's left the country.
You find a vehicle there, and that's a pretty good indicator that he's gone to the airport to leave.
But when Janet picks up the van, what she discovers tells her it wasn't Bill Rudy who drove it to the airport.
The music was like totally loud. Okay, well, that's not Bill. And totally on a radio station that Bill, like it was like heavy rock or something, and just really, really loud, right? And it's like I like had an eerie feeling like driving that van too, right back to Surrey. So
has Bill Rudy been murdered? Or has he vanished of his own accord to start a new life under a new alias, as the police suspect? At great cost, Janet remains convinced her fiancé would never leave her, and she continues to search for him.
I just stopped working until I could find out what happened to Bill. So I lost my career. Ultimately, I was evicted from Bill's house with like 3 days notice, and I spent all my money. And I remember my dad said to me, you can spend the rest of your life going through the bush looking for him, and you may never find him. And so I was coming to that point, and I never thought he would be found.
Months and then years pass, and the case cools and finally goes stone cold. Then, on September 27th, 1996, 2.5 years later, a logger makes a grisly discovery.
And I looked over and I couldn't believe it. I found a skull.
Suddenly, the Bill Rudy case is red hot. 2.5 years after Janet Bignell's fiancé, nightclub owner Bill Rudy, disappeared, there's a new twist to the story. In September 1996, a logger working in thick forest in the Harrison Mills area east of Vancouver stumbles on the unexpected, a human skull. Psychic Laurie McQuarrie says Bill Rudy's been murdered and his body has been dumped in Harrison Mills.
I felt that there had been a blow to the back of the head.
Will she be proved right? The logger immediately contacts the RCMP. They find a suspicious crack on the back of the skull, but nothing to identify whose skull it is. The skull is shipped to a crime lab for DNA analysis. Because of a huge backlog, it would take almost 2 years for the tests to identify the remains. But when the result came in, incredibly, they confirmed the skull belongs to Bill Rudy. Psychic Laurie McQuarrie was right. Bill Rudy had been buried in the exact area she marked on a map 4 years earlier.
Whatever I pointed to and drew a circle on, I felt strongly about it.
What police thought all along was a missing person case is in fact now a murder. Forensics showed Bill Rudy was killed by a blow to the back of the head, again, just as the psychic had predicted.
I could just feel it, like almost Bill was staying there not expecting it.
After 4 years, the Bill Rudy case is now officially a murder investigation.
In the case of missing persons, that file would be handed over to an active homicide unit, and they would then take over the investigation, review the file, and start over again.
And the first person the RCMP call is Janet Bignell.
Said that human remains had been found through DNA, have been positively identified to be William Rudy. And that's exactly the way he told me. It's really cold.
But she's not prepared for what happens next.
He brought another police officer in there, and then they started recording it. And then ultimately, as time went by, I found out that part of that was because now I was actually a suspect. I couldn't even believe it.
But the person the police are most interested in is Bill Rudy's business partner, David Lowe.
Mr. Lowe told investigators originally that everything was okay, that Mr. Rudy had been paid up and now Mr. Lowe was inheriting the business. It didn't take investigators very long to realize that Mr. Lowe had said things originally that were not true.
But with no crime scene, no weapon, and a very cold case, Proving that David Lowe killed Bill Rudy isn't going to be easy. What police do know is David Lowe's lifestyle had changed dramatically since Rudy disappeared.
He was making tons of money, and he didn't invest it back into the club. He went on, 2 or 3 cruises a year, Mercedes, race car.
Lowe's high-rolling lifestyle had caught up with him. He had defaulted on the mortgage and lost the Rumors nightclub. David Lowe was now working as a car salesman and herding for cash, so the police decide to exploit his weakness.
The body was a car salesman, not very good at it, apparently, so not a whole lot of income. So when he realized he could regain some status, some power, get some money, he was just prime for the bait. He wouldn't have been thinking after so many years that now he was becoming a target of a sting operation.
3 years after police confirm Bill Rudy was murdered, an undercover officer known as Jason meets and begins to form a relationship with David Lowe.
Jason was tasked to befriend Mr. Lowe and slowly gain his trust.
Jason convinces Lowe that he's a gangster and tells him he can make big money if he can prove that he too is a bad guy. Finally, David Lowe tells Jason what he wants to hear, that he killed a man. With that admission, Jason tells David Lowe he can now meet his boss.
You've told me a story about a murder, so you got to tell it to the boss to impress him. So he knows that he's not going to make the big money, he's not going to get any status or power till he's in. And this is do or die for him. It's the job interview.
At that meeting, Lowe admits to killing someone.
I whacked the guy. I hit my partner with a hammer.
They got the confession and they got it on videotape.
After a 6-month sting operation, undercover cops arrest and charge David Lowe with the murder of Bill Rudy. Money was the motive.
He missed payments, and basically Bill was going to put the squeeze on him.
His back was against the wall, and he didn't want to lose everything he had in life, and he was going to.
During David Lowe's trial, testimony confirms all of psychic Laurie McQuarrie's visions of the crime 10 years earlier. The murder did take place in Rumors nightclub, where Lowe crushed Rudy's skull with a hammer. Lowe did take Rudy's body to Harrison Mills and dumped him deep in the forest.
I knew it would come full circle. I knew they'd find him. I knew this would end up being solved.
She totally does have a natural gift, right? And I'll be forever grateful to her for sure.
On July 5th, 2004, 9 years after Bill Rudy had vanished, David Lowe is convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Finally, after 9 years, David Lowe's conviction gives Janet some peace.
And now at least I feel vindicated that the person is caught in jail, and it would have been worse to go through the rest of my life without knowing.
David Lowe is appealing his conviction. Janet Bigmill has a new life, but she will never forget Bill Rudy.
I miss him. My life would have been a lot different, but I have learned a lot. I've learned not always to take people at face value.